G'day everyone and welcome to On the Outer. I'm Gus and I'm here with my co-host Tom.
Thank you, Gus. Here we are again. Round 5 has just happened. It's a few interesting results. A few interesting teams find themselves in the top 4 this week after 5 rounds of footy. So we're going to have a little chat about that today. Gus, a few choice words for the Bombers on your part, I imagine.
We'll get to that, Tom. I don't want to talk about it now because I'll get too annoyed. Sorry, there's a big bug flying around, so I'm just going to be a bit distracted sometimes, possibly stopping it flying into my eye. Probably sums up the Bombers just about as well with how distracted and crap they were. We're going to talk about Saints and Freo as well because they are two clubs that we probably need to just discuss and see whether they're for real, Tom. And then another big story is the umpiring and some contentious decisions that have happened this year so far, or this round.
Yeah, some interesting calls with the umpiring and the new interpretation of the dissent rule. So we'll get into that. We are going to do That Was Out of Bounds as well, which we haven't touched on so far this season, not because the commentary has been exceptionally good, but just because we've been wanting to talk about other things, mainly some on-field stuff, but it's time to get stuck in. So stick around for that and, of course, reverse shine a light at the end.
All right, Tom, let's kick off the show. We'll start with the Saints because we might as well start positively and work our way down. St Kilda coming off what was a bad year last year, let's be honest. They had some really shocking performances, but they're 4-1. They're in the 4. Just beat a plucky Suns team, I think you could call it. But they look pretty good. I think they've had some big jumps in player performance. Jack Sinclair and Max King are probably the two that I think most people would point to. But there's other guys out there. I think Jared Leinart or however you say it, has come in and played a role for a team that needed a player like him. Rowan Marshall's obviously playing well. Jade Gresham being back in the team's massive for them, just adds a point of difference in their midfield and their forward line. And then, they're getting performances from those guys that had really down years last year. So Dan Butler, Jackie Higgins, guys like that.
Let's not forget our man Josh Battle as well. He's having a very good season.
Josh Battle, the only game that he played poorly in was the one that you picked him for. The reverse shine a light.
I know. Yeah, and you're right. Look, I think that the thing, and we've talked about this many times on the show, that what you need to be a premiership contending team is a critical mass of players all having career years. And I think we saw that in 2020 when the side was a little bit younger. Now they're a little bit more established. A lot of them were off last year. There was almost like a critical mass of down years last year. And then now we're seeing some of these players go to an even greater level. Obviously, Max King is following a fairly linear progression for a key forward. But, Sinclair is one that you pointed out who's having a fantastic season. And to me, just looks like the penny's dropped, not in terms of that he's playing or training harder than better before, but he knows now that he's a good player. And he's playing with this sort of unbridled confidence that, in the past we've seen him try to take things on and run the gauntlet where maybe he didn't quite have the complete wherewithal to do so. But now he's just totally in control. He knows that he's one of the better players on the ground on most occasions, and he's playing absolutely, I would say, A-grade level footy.
No, he's in the All-Australian team at the moment, in my opinion.
For sure.
And he's such a good kick. Like, I think that was one thing that perhaps we haven't seen so much from Sinclair. Like, I think he always had that kind of run and dash off half-back and in the midfield when he was playing. He's always sort of been able to win his own footy, particularly, like he wins it on the outside more so than actually getting in and under. But like, his kicking has just gone to such a high level this season. Like, he just does not seem to miss a target, really, on the run even. Been super impressed with him. I guess there is still a question with the Saints, like, is this early season form kind of a result of who they've played? But they've beaten Freo in Freo. Like, that is looking like a really good win now. They flogged Hawthorn, which again is potentially looking like a pretty good win as well. So despite the fact that maybe if we'd seen these results at the start of the season and knew what was going to happen after round 5, we would have been like, oh, well, who is that really that amazing? I actually think these are pretty good wins.
Yeah, they are good wins. I think so. The thing with the Saints is that they're the only team that hasn't played a finalist from last year yet. So you do have to keep that in mind. But I think we will see a little bit of a shake-up of the ladder this season, and so we can't necessarily look to that. And I think over 5 games you can start to see, well, yeah, maybe they're not a top 4 team. Maybe they are, but even just winning 4 out of your first 5 games is a good effort no matter who you come up against, because, the 12th, 13th best team, even if they play all of the teams below them, they might not win all of them because that's just the nature of the competition. It's so even. So, yeah, I think 4 wins out of 5. And looking back, I mean, they'd be spewing that they lost that game to Collingwood in round 1 like that. And things were looking pretty dire at that stage. Saints supporters were...
Yeah, people were talking about sacking Ratton and
rebuild and
and the other side of it too, Tom, is you win 4 games, you've banked 4 wins. You don't have that far to go to get to the finals now. You win another 8 games out of whatever there's left, 17 or whatever, you're going to make the finals. So... they're in a really good spot. Let's move on to another team, unless there's something else you wanted to touch on with the Saints.
Oh, look, no, I think we can move on. I just thought, their team, their 22 is very solid, and it has been a similar team for the last few years, but the lack of star power that we've discussed in the past, they've improved that a little bit. Obviously, Steele and now King are breaking out into star-level performers, but... they can probably get away with it because there's got so many B+ B grade players in the team. Look at even a guy guys like Crouch and Ross. They're both having their best seasons in 3 or 4 years now. So yeah, there's kind of B grade players.
Crouch maybe ever.
Yeah,
Crouch. This might be his career year. Yeah, I agree. And I would actually say, I mean, I know it's only 5 weeks, but Sinclair is, I think, becoming an A-grade player potentially. That's how good he's playing. So we'll have to see if that sustains. Obviously, that's the mark of a legitimate A-grade player. But on his form so far, he is an A-grade player. A team that's also playing really well and has a few A-graders running around is the Freo Dockers. They destroyed the Bombers on the weekend. Andy Brayshaw has taken the leap from young star into just superstar. He's now just a superstar, regardless of how old he is. Matty Tabernar kicks 7. He's, I actually think he's been an underrated player for a couple of years. I know he was in the All-Australian 40 squad, but people don't think about him as, being one of the kind of gun key forwards of the comp, where he really is.
Yeah. He just doesn't get... I wrote about this in my Team of the Week this week, was whenever he's had a sustained period of consolidated good form, he just gets injured. He never, and then he'll come back into the team and he'll work his way into some really good form again, and then he'll just when he's starting to put together a solid month, he'll get injured. So, yeah, if he'd had a better luck across his career, I think we'd be talking about him a bit differently.
Oh, I mean, it's the same with Alex Pearce, right? That's exactly the same.
Yeah.
He could, Alex Pearce potentially on talent could be a top line key defender in the comp, and he annihilated Peter Wright, who's been in good form on the weekend. Wright just couldn't get near the ball. But yeah, they just look really good. Their defensive skills are really good. Their ball winning's great. They use the footy pretty well. Their speed is amazing. Their ability to just get the footy and go is really going to trouble some teams. And yeah, I think, they were talking about Frederick on the weekend. You actually can't play him aggressively. You have to play him back shoulder because, if you give him half a metre, it turns into 20 in just 0 time. He is just gone. So, yeah, he's great. Collier, they've just got all these speedsters out there, and they've got players off half back who use the ball incredibly well as well.
That's what I was going to say. Their ball use by foot, look at the guys who make up their defence. Obviously Hayden Young, he was a top 6 draft pick based not purely on his kicking ability, but very much that's what had him in there. Chapman's another great kick. Ryan's very tidy with the ball. Even someone like Brennan Cox is pretty good with his ball use. James Aish, we know that's one of his that's almost his main asset in the team.
Only asset.
So, and then obviously Walter's very neat. He can't get the ball at the moment, so they've got lots of players who do use the ball really well. And then, like you say, with the speed thing, you combine
Mundy.
that. Oh yeah, how could I forget the best?
I was going to say
of all time. Yeah,
you just forgot the guy who just has butter coming off the ball when he kicks it.
Yeah. So look, I think Freo. I was pretty bullish on them in the preseason. I think they're pretty well placed to make a bit of a leap this year. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens when Fife comes back as well. He's obviously a superstar. Same thing as Saints. You do have to kind of look at who they've played, and they haven't played strong sides. And in fact, going into the year, their draw was looking very, very easy for the first sort of 8 weeks or so. But, the Saints have made the most of it. They've had one slip up, which was against the Saints. They've done the job every other time. They will be very pleased to get a win in Melbourne early in the season, like they did on the weekend. And a huge game against Carlton in Perth this weekend. That could be a really telling match, I think.
Almost season-defining in some ways.
Yeah.
All right, well, just before we move on then, Tom, Saints and Freo, are they for real as top 4 contenders? Are they for real as premiership contenders? Are they top 8 sides? Where do you kind of have both of these teams?
If either team were to win the flag this year, I would be enormously surprised. I don't think that they're quite there yet. Going into the year, I had Freo in the 8, so I think that's on the cards. I didn't have Saints on the 8, or really even on the cusp of the 8, so they've surprised me a lot. I think that this is the kind of season where if something goes right, or if a lot of things go right, then there's a lot of teams that can finish in the top 4, and I think I would count Saints and Freo among them. If I was doing my final ladder right now, I would probably not have either of them in, but I think they're certainly top 8 teams, for sure.
I think I agree. I think if I was going to pick one of them as a real top 4 contender, I think it would be Freo, just because they've got more top end talent and they've won 4 games without Nat 5, one of the best players in the comp. So
and they've got the home ground thing. Whereas Saints don't have that really.
There's just a bunch of kind of contextual factors that sort of play in for Freo's advantage. So I think I wouldn't be that surprised if Freo went on with this and broke out and made the top 4, similar to Brisbane did a couple of years ago. I'd be more surprised if St Kilda did that, but I think the Saints are a top 8 team. They should play in September. I mean, it's pretty hard. As I said before, it's hard to imagine 4-1 sitting there 4-1 and then not making the finals. All right, Tom. Let's talk about. Port Adelaide, Essendon, which one's more disappointing? But certainly, in my heart, the more disappointing one. The Essendon Footy Club and their capitulation on the weekend against Freo. How about you kick us off, and then I'll just kind of react to what you're saying and maybe have a cheeky cry while you talk.
Yeah, well, look, I think that the thing with the Bombers, and I touched on this in the tipping show last weekend, is that they were 18th in all of the different metrics that make up the without the ball rating last season, and so far this season they haven't improved that. They're still 18th, and I think that they were able to paper over the cracks a little bit with that last year because of how good they were with the footy. They were so dynamic and fast, and guys like Merritt, Parrish having his breakout year, Stringer, how awesome was he in the second half of the year? So then this year they've lost Merritt for a lot of the, or at least the middle sort of rounds of the year. Stringer's missed a couple of games now. He's in some doubt again for this week.
He's only played one game.
Oh, he's played one game. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so they're all of these kind of assets that they had that kind of made up for that deficiency last year. They're just not there anymore, and it's starting to show through. The other thing with the Bombers is their midfield is deep when they're all playing, and they're all playing well, but I still think there's holes in the team. when you look at it through, particularly the defence in the forward line, they've got one A grade forward, which is Stringer. Obviously, Wright's having a great year and he could get there, but right now they've got one A grade forward in Stringer, and I think they've got one A grade defender in Ridley. You know, Laverde is a good player, Hines a good player, but I wouldn't quite classify them as A graders yet. And so, you know, we really expect a side with one A grade forward and one A grade midfielder to contend for top 8 or top 4? I just don't think you can.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that there's issues on the list. I think Essendon needs a key forward, particularly is like a quality one beyond either to pair with Peter Wright or, you know, like there's just not a lot of... if Peter Wright gets shut down, there's just like zero other option, basically. And
how far away are Jones and Tipping Woody from this side?
Jones may play this weekend. He played VFL last weekend. Waller is weeks away still, apparently. I think you're right in saying defensively, like Essendon get monstered by opposition key forwards all the time because James Stewart is their biggest key defender and he's not very good at it. Zach Reed's obviously long-term. The plan is that he'll take that position. I think the reality is that they're just an incredibly young team at the moment. Like that is true. So I'll preface what I'm about to say with all of that, like that, you know, there's been a lot of injuries. They are a very young team. I think they were, again, the youngest team in the comp to run out last week because of missing Stringer and Waller and, you know, Langford, Merritt. Like, those are big players, like, for this team. They are probably 4 of the best 7 or 8 players on the list. Now, with all that being said, the capitulation of the side on the weekend and what was pretty much... what we saw was, like, pathetic, to be completely honest. I mean, the midfield effort to run 2 ways, I mean, like, there was none. There was no effort to run 2 ways. Like, so many times, and we talked about the speed of Freo, and that's certainly a factor, but, like, you can't allow 7 opposition midfielders to just run through the middle of the ground without any chase, any pressure. I mean, Matt Taberner kicked 7 on Laverde, and I actually didn't think Laverde played that badly. It's just like, if the ball's coming in at high speed, flat, with no pressure on the kick, like, you're going to kick 7 goals because, like, that's, like, Taberner's a good player, and if he's getting the ball literally just slotted down his throat every... like 30 times a game, it felt like he's going to get a bag.
Yeah, you can see Laverde's frustration at times with it. Yeah,
and so he should. If there's anyone who should be able to stand there at the end of the game and, like, yell at people, it should be Laverde and the rest of the defenders. I think our issues are just systemic, though. Like, the leadership of our club is pathetic. I mean, Dyson Heppel talks a lot about how much they hurt when they lose, you know. To be honest, after hearing it for 5 years, I don't give a shit about how much it hurts anymore. I want to actually see, like, anger or some other emotion, you know, right? Like, some kind of shift in the mentality that's, like, not talking about, oh, we're sad or we're hurting. Like, do something about it. And... I mean, Heppel played all right. He got a lot of the footy, but I didn't see him being able to shift this mentality from the opposition, like, of not chasing and yada yada. And yeah, I mean, I saw Parrish give up on a chase at one point. I saw Dylan Shield doing what Dylan Shield does, which is wander through the middle of the ground when the opposition has the ball. Devon Smith, like, I was talking to you at the start of the game, like, Sam Durham took a mark 15 metres out and Smith tried to run around onto his wrong side and just basically steal a goal off him. and he missed, of course. And it's just pathetic. Like, these are highly paid players on our team. Parrish would definitely consider himself a young leader.
Yeah.
And, like, they're just giving up on the chase. The only ones I actually saw putting, like, the gut, like, digging in and having a go, Ben Hobbs, who was playing his first game, Sam Durham, who's a second-year player, Nick Martin, who was an SSP pickup and has played really well, but again, he's like 20, and Archie Perkins, who's like injured, like literally probably shouldn't have been playing and was one of the only ones actually chasing. And it's like he's doing that with a hamstring strain or whatever he's got. And it's like...
So do you think it's a confidence thing? Because it's pretty early in the season to be saying this kind of stuff about a club, particularly with the giving up on chasing. Like, I know that in a really hard day, in a really hard game, and you're playing against the Bulldogs at Marvel and you're 10 goals down at halftime, but this is like the game was still on at halftime, and it's only round 5. So do you think that there's a confidence issue? Do you think that the players are starting to believe that maybe if Stringer and Merritt aren't there, we can't actually do this?
I mean, maybe that's a part of it. I don't know, Tom. I mean, this is the thing, and I'm not sure Essendon knows, because, like, as I said, this isn't a, and I'm sorry, like, I know we're going on and on about Essendon. Like, we'll move on in a minute. But this isn't an isolated incident, right? 2 years ago, the Western Bulldogs kicked 22 goals in a row or something against the Bombers. Like, in 2018, we got absolutely blown up our asses because we played well in 2017 and made the finals with Danaher, and we came out and lost by 60 points to GWS. Like, 4 weeks ago, we got flogged by Geelong, who don't look like they're that good. Like, this isn't an incident. If it was just one isolated incident, you could circle it, like underline it and tick it off and just say, look, weird shit happens sometimes, right? Like, but all I think Essendon fans want at this point, and Lemons, you're an Essendon fan, give us a thumbs up if you agree. All we want is for the players to act as if they give a shit as much as we do. That's it. Like, they could lose, and if they had the effort, then whatever. Like, we can accept that. But, like, to see them just give up repeatedly, and it's been repeatedly over the last 5, 7, 10 years, it just sucks. Like, it's just a shit feeling. And, like, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, it happened in Richmond probably 10, 12 years ago. Like, you were dealing with the same things. Richmond managed to get themselves out of it, but I don't know when it's going to happen to the Bombers.
Final word on the Bombers. Are you at all starting to question the position of Rutten in the coaching box?
It has to be. Like, you have to question it at this point, because we've played 5 games, like, and we are young, but we've played 5 games and had 2 pathetic performances. I'd say Brisbane and Melbourne were okay, like,
yeah,
they played all right. They weren't as good as those teams, but I don't think we expect them to be. Adelaide wasn't very good, but at least they sneaked through and won the game. And maybe Adelaide's not that bad. Like, they just beat Richmond, so... But they just bookended those with round 1 and the second half of this game, which are just... As I said, the bare minimum of that a coach needs to do is get his players to buy in, right, and play with effort. And, like, if you can't do that, then you can talk about learning new things and strategy and tactics and blah, 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 all you want. If you can't get your players to play with effort, then, like, your job has to be questioned.
All right. Very interesting. Thanks for that, Gus. We'll move on from that Essendon chat to the, by comparison, very dispassionate subject of the umpiring. And well, obviously, a big news story this week and over the round was the increased frustration around the what are they calling it? Dissent, the dissent rule, umpire disrespect, highlighted on Thursday night when Harris Andrews threw his arms out thusly to, I suppose, I mean, I guess this is the point. Was he contesting the decision, or was he just kind of expressing surprise and dismay that it had happened? It was sort of pretty nonchalant. You see that a lot.
It's pretty light on.
Yeah. We also don't know what he said, if he said anything. So that's what people seem to have a lot of opinions about stuff that happens on the field where they were not present. But this has gone on all week, and the umpire, to their credit, the AFL, to their credit, has come out and fully consolidated their position and said that no umpire disrespect is tolerated, and even disputing a decision will not be tolerated anymore. So it's a hot topic. It's certainly been some impactful moments in games where 50-minute penalties are paid, because you got to think about, like, you know, if this happens anywhere except defensive 50, then you're basically the
get a shot on goal
with the ball has, or at least an opportunity to go inside 50 and score. So, look, it's a big penalty. I think that the main takeaway from me, though, has been throughout this 5 rounds when this sort of decision making has come in, is that how much dissent are the umpires copping, for years? Like, what we're seeing now is like, oh, I can't believe this is happening so often. It's getting paid 10 times a game. Well, like, yeah, obviously this has been going on for years, and umpires have been copping this level of dissent for years, and probably worse.
They're finally getting payback. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Tom?
No, well, it's finally our attention's being drawn to it. Like, why aren't people talking about that? Being like, oh, shit. And you can't, I don't know, like, I just feel like the idea that players should be allowed, it's like their right to crack the shits a bit every now and then. Like, why? Like, other work, I don't know, that whole thing about comparing food to other workplaces is fraught, but, like, you don't really get to kind of shout at people and tell them off if you disagree with them in society in general that often. Like, it's just not.
The argument on the other side is that if people made as many mistakes as umpires do, they probably wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, well, that's true. But this is the cycle, right? So the whole long-term vision in my mind of this rule is that we don't have enough umpires.
Yeah.
Because of the, partly because of the abuse.
How crap of a job it is, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And then because of that, we end up with a lower standard of umpiring in AFL levels, not to mention lower levels, which then creates the dissent, which then makes umpires not want to play, which then creates a lower standard of umpiring. It's your classic vicious cycle. So I think this is a long-term plan. People always get really frustrated. Remember the stand rule happened last year, and after 5 weeks, people were like, oh, it's a disgrace. Like, we can't sanction this. And then now you might see like 1 or 2 paid per round. It just doesn't happen that often. Like, we need to stop reacting to these rule changes in the first 5 weeks. Think about what this looks like in 10 years.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we had to do something about the dissent thing. I think the specific thing that I maybe have an issue with in terms of the arm, as you said, is like, well, the obvious one, which is that it is not being paid consistently, because it's not. Like, there's been plenty of times where players have put their arms out and not been pinged for 50. That's annoying, and that's been talked about a lot.
If the umpire is feeling as though they've been disrespected, like, isn't that kind of that's all that really matters? Like, whether the action is different to, certain umpires might, and you might have things that don't happen in a vacuum either. Like, we know that we think that they should, but if you've been yelling shit at the umpire all day and then you stick your arms out again, Look, I agree with the dissent rule, right? Like, I think it's great, and fine if we are paying that as dissent, then let's do that. I guess to me it just feels like a little bit that Harris Andrews got pinged for it, right? And maybe it wasn't going to be that, but then because the umpire pinged him, now it is, if that makes sense. Like, it seems to have just kind of been developed this week because an umpire made a mistake rather than necessarily that was the original plan. Yeah.
But, whatever. I'm not, look, to be honest, Tom, I'm not, I don't really care enough about it to be like fuming about it or whatever. Like, I think if you abuse or dissent or disrespect the umpire, yeah, you should get pinged for 50. That's it. Like, that's enough. That's enough of a rule.
Yeah, and these players now that are playing in 2022 will suffer because of it. But then in the future,
up also.
Just like in the future, it won't be. Players will have learned.
I was flippant about if people made as many mistakes as umpires, blah blah blah. But like, just don't yell at the umpire.
Yeah.
Like, you're an adult who should be able to control your emotions. Just because you play AFL, like, let's just stop using the excuse, they're competitive beasts, as like a reason for them being dicks. Like, that's you don't just get to do that whenever you want just because you apparently are more competitive than other people.
Yeah, and look, umpiring, it's not. I don't think it's a particularly high standard.
No,
but like, if you stop making umpires' lives and their work lives really unpleasant, then it's going to get better. The umpiring will get better because more people will want to do it. So that's the long-term vision here, I think, and that's what people need to keep sight of.
All right, let's move on, Tom. We've got a bumper episode or segment of That Was Out of Bounds. All right, Tom, we've got two parts to this, or two sections of this segment, I suppose. The first is the continued evidence that AFL commentators, and I mean, particularly this week, we've noticed it on TV, but it happens on the radio. I mean, they're all the same anyway. Just don't watch football, apparently. Like, any more than they just do the games that they commentate and they watch those games, but there's no further engagement with the product. This was very obvious when Brian Taylor, or BT as he's affectionately known by idiots, was very proudly announced that, this is the first time I'm watching Jason Horne-Francis. Like, this is the number one pick in the draft. You haven't watched him play up to round 5. Like, what the hell are you talking about? And then asking, and was he a clear-cut number one choice? Like, doesn't even follow the concept of the media. Like, has he heard of Nick Dacos?
Yeah.
Like,
he should have. I mean, people doing their jobs, and I'm sure that and then we know there are football pundits who do their jobs before, like, know the players before they're drafted. They actually watch a bit of under 18s football, or at least keep tabs on like players' strengths, weaknesses, background, that kind of thing. Brian, not only has he not done that, but the guy's played 4 very, very impressive games, and he just never paid attention to that either.
Yeah,
seriously,
it's just amazing. Like, that you can literally, and he would be Brian Taylor would be being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. Like, he would be an incredibly well-off man on the basis of this, and he's not watched the number one pick in the draft play up until round 5 when he had to because he was commentating the game.
Yeah. The other one with BT, I'm not sure if you saw his discussion about the intercept mark and his lack of understanding.
I didn't see it this week, but this happened last year as well that we were talking about. Anyway, you go on.
Oh, it's just like, he's unable to really, this is live on the broadcast, he's unable to really understand why some marks are classified as intercept marks and some are just regular marks, and for those who think that's like a Monty Python skit or something, like no, like literally he does not understand what the word intercept means. He's like, isn't it just a mark? But it's like, no, because
the opposition kicked it.
One of them you get the ball back, and the other one you just get it from your team. Very, very simple stuff. And honestly, if I was to pick one concept that BT wouldn't understand necessarily, or a type of concept, it is something that is modern. And intercept marking is such a big part of the modern game. Maybe it wasn't, 30 years ago or even 20 years ago when BT was...
But it's not intercept marking. It's just the word intercept.
But he just like the fact that he just wouldn't be across something that is one of probably the 3 key pillars to most teams' success is their ability to intercept the ball back. Like, that's really one of the main things. That's one of the main ways that teams win games and one of the main ways that teams play in 2022. And he just has no idea what it is. Like, the man just doesn't follow football.
The other one that came across the desk, Tom, was Dermot Brereton and his criticism of Max King. He went on all game about this, about saying, King has just got to make sure he's kicking goals when the game's actually on the line. Like, he shouldn't just be filling his boots. And this is the critique of King on the basis that I think he's kicked 8 of his 15 goals or whatever it is in the fourth quarter. Now, Tom, you're a Richmond fan. Did you feel like Max King was just filling his boots when the game was over in the St Kilda Richmond game?
No. I feel like he was pretty influential in that one, and certainly the week before against Freo as well, where he basically completely swung the contest with his burst.
Like 3 goals in 5 minutes or whatever it was. Like, he literally has won 2 of the 4 games that St Kilda has won off his own boot. Like, who cares if he's not kicking goals in the first quarter? Like, if he kicks 4 in the final quarter and wins the game, and it's just, and that, like, that's less stupid than not having not having seen Jason Horne-Francis. But it's just like not realizing that there's context. It's just that Dermy sat down, read some stats, formed an opinion off that, and then like went with it for the whole game, and like didn't realize that there was context attached to those statistics. And it's like, well, if you watched St Kilda Richmond, you would know that yes, Max King kicked 4 goals in the last quarter, but it was literally to win the game.
Yeah, like, scores were, I think Richmond were in front.
They were in front. They were in front.
Close, yeah. Another thing on the Max King thing, just quickly, like this is something that does my head in. I've noticed it so much this year with Max King, is the conversation in commentary and in the media is all about what he could be rather than what he is.
Which is like leading the Coleman.
Yeah, he's having a great year. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it. Just talk about what he is now, which is one of the best forwards in the league. Yeah. Instead of it's always about what he could be, comparing him to Buddy's stats at the same age, comparing him to Rewalt, talking about like his capacity to be the next 100-goal kicker. Like, just talk about what's in. The same thing's happening with Noah Bolter. At Richmond's being like, he's got this like athletic profile that we haven't seen before. He could do this, he could be that. Like, he's also just like a good player now. Just talk about what he's doing rather than like this. Everything has to be about the GOAT conversation, right?
Yeah,
it's and there's nothing. The GOAT.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we've talked about that before about how Max Gawn's the greatest ruckman of all time, Bont's the greatest bulldog, blah blah blah. Like, look. I understand. I get it because everybody loves projecting potential, right? Because you can say whatever the hell you want, and like no one can really prove you wrong. But like Max King is literally in the All Australian team, leading the Coleman right now. Like, why can't we just be like, man, Max King's awesome? Like, why do we have to have this big conversation? And the amount of times people point out his flaws too, like, he doesn't do this that well yet, and it's like, who cares?
No one does everything well. Like, Danger shanks the ball. Dusty goes in and out of games. Like, Petrarca
Lance Franklin is not a good contested mark.
Yeah, exactly.
Like everybody has weaknesses in their game. It does not matter. If Max King is marking the ball 7 meters above the ground, which is what he seems like he's doing at the moment, it is not going to matter if he's a bit skinny. Yeah. Anyway. Let's move on to the other part of our that was out of bounds, Tom. And this one is a bit more like, we like to have a bit of a gag with this, but this is a bit more sort of on the nose, I think. Taylor Walker on his Triple M spot, I think, that he does every week. He probably hasn't been doing it recently, but he's back now. Commenting on the Trent Cotchin thing, and for anyone who hasn't seen the vision, basically Walker bundled Cotchin over the boundary line. Cotchin threw the foot out at him. It looked like he kind of got him with the stops a little bit. It wasn't a big deal. But basically, after Cotchin was given a fine, Tex Walker went on to the radio and was like, "Oh, if that was me, I would have got 4 weeks." Now, for those who, well, everybody knows the context around this. Taylor Walker's just come back from a 6-week suspension for being racist. And look, that's bluntly what happened.
Yeah.
What an idiot. Like, is he seriously trying to pull the victim card out now and be like, people treat me harshly because I am who I am or something? Like, is that actually what is happening right now?
It was an insight into his thinking that perhaps, he thinks he was hardly done by with his 6-week suspension.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only sort of reading that I can take into and we have these conversations sometimes about players. Like, the one that used to always get brought up was like Lindsay Thomas or Hayden Ballantyne, these kind of pesky often small forwards who do sometimes, get harshly judged or whatever. But
Toby Green's a good example. Yeah.
Walker's not included in that because his thing's a completely different thing. His suspension, it was completely like he's lucky to still have a job.
People talk about the fact that he's given a second chance. His second chance is that he's in the AFL.
Yes.
That's it. Like,
still there. He got 6 weeks, I think, which was incredibly lenient in the first place. The whole mindset that he must have, thinking like, "Oh, I'm one of the, black sheep of the AFL."
I'm a victim.
No, mate, you don't get to talk about anything. Just go out there, and if you are fortunate enough to be included in the AFL, which it seems as though he is, just go out there and play. He's played 2 brilliant games in his first 2 games back. Just do that. Just don't do anything. If I was him, and certainly if I was the club or his management, I'd be telling him, don't do the friggin'
Why are you
M
on
thing.
the radio? Yeah, why are you
Keep your
going
head
on the
down.
radio? Yeah. Just go out and kick goals, shut up, hope that people forget.
Yeah.
Because they will. I mean, Wayne Carey's still walking around on bloody television every weekend. Like, they will forget.
Yeah.
But they're not going to forget if you keep talking shit about it, and acting like you've somehow been poorly treated because you got a very light suspension and got to keep your career after being an absolute pig dog. So
the other side of it too is that you don't really see players discuss opposition sanctions, like tribunal sanctions at all, ever. Maybe if a player is like asked directly about it, like on a panel show or something, being like, "Oh, what do you think of this overall concept of a suspension for this act or whatever?"
They might say, "Oh, maybe it was a bit unfair," and the only time they'll comment on it is usually if they say it's too much. It's very rare that they'll say it the other way.
Exactly. Yeah. So for Tex to say that, and we know that there's bad blood between Cochin and Walker, and Cochin and Adelaide, and vice versa for the grand final. But like to come out and say that an opposition player who, it wasn't a great thing that Cochin did, but again, it's not that serious. To come and comment on that and say that he basically should have got weeks because that's what Walker thinks he would have got is so rare. It's really, really rare, and it's sort of like it's almost like Walker feels like he's already kind of ostracised from the AFL community, so why not just go there and swing?
Yeah, he thinks he's being blamed for everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on, Tom, because that's just a depressing conversation, isn't it?
All right.
What was the last thing? Oh yeah, that was out of Shine a Light, reverse Shine a Light.
There we go.
Who did you pick?
So last week I went with my man Hayden McLean, who I thought might have a good game with a bit more opportunity, a bit more ball going his way with Buddy out, and I think he's a pretty good player. I thought that he teamed up pretty well with McDonald. I thought they seemed like a pretty handy duo together, particularly in the first half. Plenty of ball going their way. I don't have his stats in front of me, Gus, but how did you rate old Macca's game?
Oh yeah, you get a point, Tom. McLean was very good.
Excellent.
Very good. So you're on 2 now.
All right.
I had Jared Linett, however you say it.
It's always said twice, or whatever it is.
I can't do it. I'm sorry. Look, he had 18 touches, 8 marks, but that is pretty much in line with his games so far this year. So, while a good game, I don't think he deserves a point for this one.
No, I think, Gus, your problem this year is you're picking players that are too good.
Yeah, I reckon.
I reckon that some spanners. Yeah. All right. Well, this week, and you actually touched on this earlier in the episode, Gus, my reasoning for picking this player. But this week, for round 6, I'm going with
Freddie Krueger.
Big Freddie Krueger.
Oh, the Krug.
No,
I love Krueger.
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan.
He was good against Brisbane. Didn't probably capitalise enough. He kicked a couple of goals, I think, but some of the things he did just showed that he could be a really good option for Collingwood in their key forward. Their ongoing search for a key forward post David Cloak or something. And then we obviously come up against the Bombers this week.
Travis Cloak, I think, not David.
Against the Bombers with an undermanned defence, I think he potentially could have a little breakout game, kick 4 or 5.
He reminds me of like the athletic dude that turns up to footy who's never played footy before. But it's just like way more athletic than everyone else in country footy or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. I am going to pick Max Holmes from Geelong. He's had a couple of good games and a couple of quiet games so far this year. And the Geelong's playing North, and North have been ripped apart by outside run so far this season. He's playing on that wing half-backy kind of role. So, yeah, I think he could potentially blow up, get 30 touches or something and have a massive game.
Nice one. Yeah, no, he's having a good year, Holmesy. Cool. All right.
Yeah, bit of a breakout for him. Interesting too that they dumped Jordan Clark, who has very similar traits for him. And
that whole dynamic was pretty ruined, I think, by the end of it.
Yeah. Anyway, Tom, that's the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you want to get in touch with us, you can hit us up at ontheouter1@gmail.com or any of our socials. Tune in. Oh, yeah, we're on YouTube. As you can see, button. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe. So we're coming to you every time, and you know when we're up. We'll have our tips show out on Thursdays at Lemons that it comes out usually. Give us a thumbs up. Yep, I'm going to accept that. Thank you. Otherwise, we'll be back next week with another episode of On the Outer's main show. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch you next week. Ciao.